All right, let's talk about the circadian rhythm and the disorders that one might find in the sleep lab regarding circadian rhythms. The word circadian is derived from the Latin word circa, meaning about or around, and diem, meaning day. When you put it together, you get about a day. Circadian rhythms are internally programmed, and we have behaviors and like little insistencies that our body tells us when to do things. Physiology means something that normally happens with the body, like sleeping. You sleep at night because you're supposed to. Your internal body clock desires that because that's its function. Almost all life is bound to these rhythms, be it human, plant, or bacteria. It affects our sleep wake cycles, activity levels, hormone secretions, body temperature, mood, performance, and many other aspects. Mary Carskadden did a lot of good work with circadian rhythms and found that to sleep in line with your circadian rhythm, all the other rhythms must be in line to work together, meaning your food intake and exercise all happens at certain times. There are other biological rhythms other than the circadian rhythm, specifically the ultradian rhythm and infradian rhythms. The ultradian rhythm is much shorter and can last just milliseconds, like in the case of a heartbeat, or it could last several minutes, like REM or non-REM. Infradian rhythms, on the other hand, are longer than circadian rhythms, lasting days or weeks, which could include the menstrual cycle and hibernation for some species of animals. Circadian rhythms are represented by a sinus wave or a sine wave, meaning it goes up and down. A sine wave is just going up and then down. When we want to describe a circadian rhythm, we talk about its amplitude and its period, or tau. There are a lot of instances in sleep especially where you'll hear or see Greek letters like tau for different things. Like tau means period or duration. Delta means change, like the delta in pressure from beginning to end of CPAP. If you think about it, you feel more sleep pressure as the night goes on, which follows this bell curve sine wave. The circadian phase indicates the time within the circadian cycle, like the trough or a nadir shown here in the image. Nadir meaning, or you might hear nadir as well, meaning the lowest point. The part of the body, brain specifically, that controls the circadian clock is the suprachiasmatic nuclei, or you might hear suprachiasmatic nuclei. It's also abbreviated the SCN. We consider this the master circadian clock, although there is evidence of clocks actually in other places of the body like the gut. The SCN is located near the front of the hypothalamus where the optic nerves cross. Photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, these are cells that work kind of like solar panels. They take in light where the light hits the retina or the back part of your eye. And these retinal ganglion cells take the data through the retinohypothalamic tract to the SCN. Retinohypothalamic tract means from the retina to the hypothalamus. It's how the brain knows how much light there is. The retinohypothalamic tract is a string of nerve cells that connects the hypothalamus to the retina. Entrainment is the physical routine your body gets used to when it follows proper sleep hygiene. Everything lines up time-wise through the sun. We are entrained to the circadian rhythm by time cues, also known as zeitgebers, which is a term used by a lot of sleep specialists. The sun is a zeitgeber. Temperature is another zeitgeber. An alarm clock is a zeitgeber, but it's not a natural one. And it's not one that's very strong because it's mechanical and it can change. Natural zeitgebers are much more stronger because it happens every day at a very specific time. Some people are not able to entrain with the normal zeitgebers, typical people do, and they may experience something called a free-running circadian rhythm. For many blind patients who lack the retinohypothalamic tract or a working retina, or patients with a hypothalamic disorder, there is no end to the cycle until other zeitgebers occur. People who live in Alaska may have trouble when the sun stays in the sky all the time. When there's no natural time cue for things to happen like the sun, other things become the time cue. Check out this diagram. There are two halves, a bottom and a top. The top half, with the 4 gray lines up here, and triangles, show circadian entrainment right there. Those gray bars represent when the patient's body temperature is at a minimum. The white and black bar up here at the top shows when a person is exposed to light or darkness. The bottom half just shows a black bar, meaning there is not the light cue for this patient, the second patient. As you can see, the triangles move further and further back, suggesting a free-running cycle because the cycle is longer than 24 hours. When there is no change in light or dark, as far as the patient can tell, the patient has free-running circadian rhythm. Phase shifting is when a zeitgeber moves the normal circadian rhythm to a new time, a lot like daylight savings time and going back and forth. This is also like going between time zones. Phase shifts differ in direction, either going backwards or forwards in time, and how hard the shift depends on when the zeitgebers happen and how intense they are. Specialists can compare the relationships between zeitgebers, circadian rhythms, and phase shifts with diagrams called phase response curves, or PRCs. Let's look at this diagram, which was part of a study in 1981 that was about resetting the circadian clocks of patients with delayed sleep phase insomnia. Delayed sleep phase insomnia means it happens later. This is a phase response curve, PRC, that shows when the researchers exposed organisms to light at certain times of the day. The top graph indicates when the organism, and I don't know what this organism was used to nighttime, their subjective sense of night. Those black bars are circadian indicators like core temperature and high melatonin levels. The more melatonin you have, the sleepier you get. When with segment A, you can see a free-running cycle because the black bars aren't lined up. They are staggered further and further to the right, meaning further and further into the nighttime hours. Segment B shows when the organism was exposed to light later than their cycle starts, and it shifts the cycle forward. Segment C shows the several days of having to be trained back and back and back to shift to a new cycle. There are 6 disorders involving circadian rhythms: advanced sleep phase, delayed sleep phase, free-running type, irregular sleep-wake pattern, jet lag disorder, and shift work disorder. Advanced sleep phase disorder means the time that a person feels sleepy and ready to go to bed happens earlier, and they wake up early as well, sometimes around 4 a.m. And I sometimes get advanced sleep phase and delayed sleep phase mixed up and moving times forward or backward. What I do to remember that is to think advanced in age sleep phase disorder, because although older people aren't the only ones with advanced sleep phase, they serve as a majority. So I think advanced in age, advanced in sleep time, meaning sooner than later. We're advancing it sooner than later. People who feel sleepy and sometimes will still not go to bed early and still wake up early, meaning they are losing sleep and could become chronically deprived of sleep. Sometimes light therapy and some exercise in the evening can help. This is an example of sleep-wake diary of a patient with advanced sleep phase disorder. You can see the patient is sleepy earlier in the afternoon, evening, and wakes up pretty early as well. The black boxes are where they slept. The shaded boxes are where they began to be sleepy. right there. And typically they woke up right around 4 a.m. The opposite of advanced sleep phase disorder is delayed sleep phase disorder. And this is when a patient feels awake at night and doesn't go to sleep until maybe 2 a.m. or later. This occurs the most in adolescents and young adults. This has been shown to be a growing matter, and it's not pathological or a disease. We call it a disorder because we as a society make children go to school when it's convenient for adults, which is usually when they work starting early in the morning. I personally remember falling asleep in class a lot in high school, and many of my friends did as well, and we were punished for it. Now that I think back on it, it's pretty cruel to punish someone for something they really can't control. Society has started pushing back on that now, and the public is more educated. But early sleep times for middle and high school are still a thing. College as well with their 8 a.m. class times. Just like advanced sleep phase disorder, delayed sleep phase disorder can be helped with light therapy in the morning and melatonin supplement in the evening in an attempt to advance the sleep cycle, meaning bring it sooner. This is an actigraphy log which tracks how much movement the patient does during the day and during what time. The black marks indicate the most movement and the white indicates stillness. And this is over 2 days. It appears the patient stays asleep somewhere between 2 a.m. or 12 p.m. and is awake for the rest of the day. I'm sorry, this is 2 weeks, not 2 days. This is probably what my sleep schedule looked like when I was working at the Chinellos in Greenville when we stayed open till 3 a.m. Free-running sleep type is when the time cues or zeitgebers aren't powerful enough or able to entrain a person with a 24-hour cycle. This occurs mostly with blind patients or those who don't have the retinohypothalamic tract intact. The cycle simply depends on the rest of the cues the body has. Sleep pressure is definitely one, but people can usually stay up longer than usual if they don't have darkness cues, making the cycles slightly longer than 24 hours. This sometimes can cause periodic insomnia and excessive sleepiness. This is a 2-week actigraphy plot of a person with free-running type sleep disorder. You can see the clear diagonal lines. Here's a pretty decent diagonal line. And you can see a clear diagonal line which shows up at the beginning and end of the dark plots, which is movement. This demonstrates a cycle that is slightly longer than 24 hours, so the sleep time gets progressively later and later. Irregular sleep-wake pattern is when a person sleeps for short amounts of time at different times during the day and night. While if you add up all these times, you might get an adequate amount of sleep, but the time in bed is most likely elevated. The demographic who experiences irregular sleep-wake are those who are institutionalized, patients with neurologic damage, mainly in the hypothalamus. Jet lag disorder is when a patient is traveling to different time zones and they're not used to the sun being up or down at a specific time. Anyone can experience jet lag, but international leaders, professional athletes, and entertainers are most likely the hardest hit because of the traveling. Symptoms can include acute insomnia, which means a short duration of insomnia, excessive sleepiness, and sometimes you can get an upset stomach from it too. Symptoms may be prolonged if the patient stays in a time zone and doesn't acclimate before switching again. The constant shifts can keep the body guessing when to do things. Re-entrainment can happen if you time the zeitgebers properly, usually with the assistance of a phase response curve. You can thank the invention of the light bulb for shift work disorder. If it weren't for the ability to see and do things at night when it's dark, we would all sleep at night. That, and if we didn't need money. Shift work may induce insomnia and excessive daytime sleepiness. not being able to fall asleep if the sun is bright in your eyes, EDS on the job from not getting sleep when you need to. Sometimes this intentional shift can cause gut issues or even menstrual cycle issues. Bright light, especially blue light, can improve tolerance of night work, but you must avoid light when possible when you are trying to sleep. This is an actigraphy plot from a shift work patient. You can see where the patient does the most moving around with all the black places. Looks like they are working 4 consecutive night shifts. You can see on Fridays, they sleep during the nighttime, changing up their sleep routine. Not sticking to nighttime hours and shifting sleep periods like this can wreak havoc on your rhythm and your body. This is what I did to see my family during the day, during the weekend. I would revert back to normal sleep, and that was awful. To properly evaluate circadian rhythm sleep disorders in the sleep lab, it's important to get a few things. 1, a clinical history is necessary to categorize symptoms and consider differential diagnosis, or thinking of another reason for the symptoms. Another would be a sleep-wake diary, and it's a subjective, meaning what the patient thinks. It's a subjective measure of sleep-wake patterns over time to show what the patient is doing, thinking what they're doing. Wrist actigraphy is a useful objective measure of movement patterns over time. Things like this could confirm or deny what the patient subjectively thinks they're doing. Sleep studies are not indicated for circadian rhythm disorders unless they're trying to rule out another sleep disorder that might be causing it. Because the patients are already having difficulty with when they're trying to sleep, the results are going to vary, because if they knew when they would be sleepy, then they would probably sleep then. When possible, you want to match the sleep test time with the patient's next sleep period, or when they believe that will happen. Circadian rhythms can be measured through various procedures in collecting different kinds of data. Core body temperature and salivary melatonin levels can be taken and plotted in a graph, such as this one. This is a record of core body temperature and melatonin in saliva in a young adult male, recorded in constant conditions, meaning that nothing is changing. You can see that solid line, which represents temperature, stays high during the day and goes low at night. Melatonin levels are represented by the dashed line, and they are low during the day and high at night. There's a little black arrow that points out the lowest level of melatonin and temperature where they intersect, right there. Melatonin begins to rise after the steep decline in temperature. Once the body temperature reaches that minimum level, melatonin onset begins, meaning melatonin begins to build up. In some cases of delayed sleep phase and advanced sleep phase disorder, the best solution might just be choose work and school schedules that best complement the situation. Applying the phase response curves, light exposure at night in the hours prior to the body temperature minimum causes phase delays, while light exposure in the early morning after the temperature minimum causes phase advances. Blue light induces phase shifts the most effectively, opposite of red light. Blue light is naturally seen in the morning, and red light is naturally seen in the evening. It is also important to avoid light exposure at inappropriate times through the use of blackout shades and blue-blocking sunglasses. Melatonin administration in the evening hours promotes phase advances that may be beneficial in delayed sleep phase disorder and in entraining free-running rhythms, particularly in blind patients. Chronotherapy is for severe delayed sleep phase disorder, which involves repeated phase delays over the course of multiple days until the circadian rhythm is oriented to the desired earlier time of the day. Hypnotics and stimulants and some other medications are sometimes used to treat the symptoms of circadian rhythm sleep disorders, but they do not address the underlying circadian misalignment. Working nights is associated with significantly decreased total sleep time and excessive sleepiness. Night shift workers are at increased risk for mistakes on the job and car accidents during their commute. These risks are exacerbated by long 12-plus hour night shifts. Alertness management policies are an effective way to communicate the expectations of maintaining alertness at work and to provide procedures and resources for coping with shift work in the sleep center. All right, let's study hard on the circadian rhythms. This kind of stuff is going to definitely be on the exam, so all the other stuff we talk about will, but not exactly in the this stuff is really big, and there will be more on the test about this kind of stuff than professionalism and stuff like that. All right, we'll see you next time.